I started maybe a year ago to introduce myself as a recovering shy guy. And the whole time I'm just like in my head, oh my God, what I'm going to say.
You were the guy who didn't want to share your fun fact.
I started referring to it more as ice melters. We have to build a campfire that melts the ice.
So I like this idea of ice melting because it's progressive. Welcome to another day, another workshop. Today I'm receiving Jan Keck. He's a facilitator, an expert in building real connection, a TEDx speaker, and the creator of Ask Deep Question, a card deck that helps people move beyond small talk and have meaningful conversation. Jan is all about creating spaces where people feel safe to open up and truly connect. In this episode, we're going to talk how we can design such spaces, how we can create a real connection from the start. I'm super excited about this one, and I'm sure you will learn a bunch about creating meaningful conversation. So without further ado, let's welcome Jan.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this. Very excited how our conversation is going to go on a path of its own, and hopefully we'll stop in lots of places where I can share some stories and some insights on exactly what you shared.
Yeah, so of course I made this presentation about yourself, but if you could introduce yourself to the audience with your own words, what would you say?
So I started maybe a year ago to introduce myself as a recovering shy guy, because
Okay.
I used to be a very shy kid that I was terrified of raising my hand, although I had the right answer in class. Going around the room, doing introductions and sharing, I don't know, your name and a fun fact was like my worst nightmare because I could see how everybody would share something super interesting. And the whole time I'm just like in my head, oh my God, what I'm going to say. And the closer that my turn came, the faster my heart was beating and the more anxious I got. So when it finally was my turn, I did not want the spotlight. I just wanted somebody else to continue. And I realized, number one, there's a lot of things that I have learned now to feel more confident in those types of situations. Improv classes is like one big part of that. But more so, I don't want anybody to feel that way, where in an activity that is meant to bring you together and make you more comfortable to engage with others, it actually makes you shut down. You're in your head. You're not listening to each other. There's lots of things that can be done better when we're designing experiences for people that don't make the quiet people, the shy introverted people, feel excluded. So I now see being a recovering shy guy, being a people-loving introvert as a strength, because I have this unique insight in what those people might be thinking about when we're designing workshops, when we're designing trainings, or any type of experience when a group of people collaborate.
Well, it gets interesting right from the start because people don't know maybe, but you're known as also the icebreaker guy. Well, you don't call them icebreakers, you call them ice melters. I think it's interesting, and maybe you can explain us why. But what I like is that you were the guy who didn't want to share, to share your fun fact, because maybe you were impressed by the other stories of the other people, and now you are being one of the reference on this topic, and the perspective that you bring is really interesting because you know how people feel and what could be the obstacles. So how did you came up with this concept of ice melter? And
so I actually have this bit of a love-hate relationship. So yes, there's a lot of icebreakers that I despise because they just make people they accomplish the opposite. They don't build trust and connection. They make people feel like they want to run out of the room, at least some people. And on the other hand, I love when somebody gives me a tool or a prompt or an activity that I can use to just skip the small talk. I'm also not a huge fan of talking about the weather and how traffic was, of getting somewhere. I can only do that for a certain time. What I'm really interested in is having the deeper, more meaningful conversations. And often a good icebreaker or a good prompt should help you make it less awkward to meet somebody new. If you're going to a networking event and there's a prompt, share a recent win that you've had, small or big, then right away I have an excuse to talk to a stranger and get into a conversation where we actually get to know each other. And we're not just sharing, hey, what do you do? I do this. What do you do? I do this. And then it's kind of awkward silence and nobody knows where to go from there. So I love a good prompt or a good invitation, but I also know that they can be done a lot better. And for me, I now have this very specific visual kind of burned into my brain. When I hear the word icebreaker, I literally imagine a group of people that are all frozen in ice, like they're covered head to toe, they can't move. And then the leader or facilitator walks into the room with a big sledgehammer. Like it's so heavy, they have to drag it on the floor. And then they start whacking the ice. They start trying to free the people from the ice that they're in by doing the icebreaker. Like it is just the visual. It's very violent. It's jarring. And I started referring to it more as ice melters, or just the process of melting the ice being something that is way more gentle and also takes a little bit more time. And the reason why I have the campfire behind me is because, to me, the main metaphor that I start using in my work is we have to build a campfire that melts the ice. Like that's what actually will ensure that even the, let's say, extroverted people that are super excited about an icebreaker, like they are ready to engage as much as the person who's maybe super skeptical, maybe new to the group, doesn't know anyone, feels hesitant to even share anything personal. Like we need to make sure that both of those kind of ends of the spectrum have an opportunity to connect with each other on the same level.
Wow. Okay. This is such a great image because, as someone who watched a lot of anime when he was a kid, like, when someone was frozen and they tried to break the ice, like they also break the people. So I like this idea of ice melting because it's like, it's progressive. And to be honest, like I'm an extrovert guy, so I think it will be interesting as a perspective. And I also used to hate icebreaker, like, because I find them always like, strange, weird, cringe, especially the shaky stuff and things like that. I changed my view after COVID, actually, but during COVID, because before in a session or any type of gathering, you would have opportunities to connect with people through a coffee break to a lunch. So you didn't necessarily needed an activity to create connection. And then when COVID hits, like remote workshops, it's only about the work. So I could see that we were lacking this deeper connection to give better results, to improve productivity, creativity, etc., etc. And this is the moment where I changed my mind. But indeed, finding the right activity that doesn't create the stereotype that we see when we have an icebreaker, when we participate to icebreaker is kind of tricky. So my question to you is like, how can you design a right activity to create the connection and avoid such results, like I mentioned?
Yeah, from a lot of people that I talk to, as I'm writing a book about this topic, I did a lot of research conversations trying to figure out, so what's actually the problem with icebreakers for other people, not just my own personal experience. And very often I hear from facilitators and trainers, they feel like it's just this tick box exercise. They're just like, I was trained that at the start of every session, I need to do an icebreaker. So I go online, I open a book of like icebreaker activities, and I just pick something random, and then I do it. But somehow the participants are never as excited about them as I am. And sometimes I even hear people like, I hate icebreakers. Why do I have to do them at the beginning? I don't like them, so why should I do them for my participants? And I think the challenge is if it feels completely random, if it feels there's no connection between what a group is there to do and the activity that they are invited, or sometimes it feels like being forced to participate at the beginning, then they start questioning, so this is just a waste of time. Like, why are we doing this? So the more we can find an activity that is specifically designed for the purpose of why the group is here and for the people who are in the room, because there's some activities I would do with a group of strangers, but if you have a team that has been working together for years that know each other pretty well already, then you have to choose a different activity. So to me, there's this spectrum of from strangers to like friends, let's call it. But then there's also the other spectrum where some groups are totally okay to do something super silly. Like I'm thinking like summer camp counselors, I don't know, theater kids. Like you can do lots of things that ask people to step outside of the comfort zone, do something silly, do some kind of performance. And then on the other hand, you have people who are super serious, who might be the group that are wearing suits, and you're actually in a boardroom facilitating a leadership training or a conversation between C-suite executives. There, I might not play a game that is super silly. So picking the right activity for the right environment, for the right group is one of the most important things.
Okay. When I think about those type of activities, I think about you and Chad. I guess you know Chad. And I remember we had the discussion through a post because, like you said, he also believes that the activity of so the icebreaker activity or ice melter. Let me try to use this word better, right? The ice melter activity should be linked to the workshop. And you also said the same, like there should be a link. In my opinion, I believe that I use ice melter for two reasons. First, to create a more engaging session, to connect people, because it has been proven that it has better result on what you're creating, what you're doing with the team. And the second one is also it serves me as a facilitator to read better the room. Okay, this is this type of person. This is like he's more introvert. This is going to be like a difficult voice to manage, etc., etc. So in my opinion, you don't necessarily need to have a link because my goal is to create this connection first. And I've seen amazing results without having an activity that has a link. What is your view on that? Like,
if the purpose of connecting your participants is related to how you're going to collaborate later, like if collaboration is part of the workshop, then connecting people to me is connected to the purpose, right? Okay. So if the way I actually see not just the activity, but there's so many other little things that you can do to help people connect and like melt the ice that start even way before people show up in the room. All of this should help the group take risks. Like that's the one big epiphany that I actually had while writing my book a couple months ago, where the goal is to get a group ready to take a risk, because most meaningful work requires risk, people taking a risk. If that is sharing something personal, sharing something vulnerable, if that is actually stepping outside of your comfort zone and participating in a transformational activity. Like if we want to create meaningful work, then people need to be ready to take risks. But we can't force anyone to take a risk. It needs to be a decision that they make because they feel like, oh, I feel safe, I feel supported by the group, by the facilitator, that nothing bad will happen even if I fail. And going back to the campfire, that's what why I love the campfire as a metaphor, because if I took a big log, like I have in my hand right now, and I tried to light that with a lighter, then nothing would happen. Like I want to build a big campfire, so I'll take the biggest log and I'll light that. It doesn't work. What I need to do is I need to find my tinder, my paper, like anything that burns really easily. Once that little flame is burning, then I can add the next little sticks on it. Once that is burning, at the end, I can put the big log, and the big log is the biggest risk that I might ask my group to take in a session. So if the risk is really big, I need to be paying way more attention to how the ice has melted. And it might also take a way longer time. If in the workshop, people don't have to take a large risk. That is like, a retrospective workshop for a team that already knows each other. They already have trust built. Then I might not even need to spend a lot of time on an icebreaker, ice melter activity. I could much quicker I just need to help them transition into the session and then very quickly get into the content.
Okay. So there are two great things you're saying, and I want to react on two of them. The first one is, just to make sure I understood, like imagine we are running, an AI workshop. We are trying to identify opportunities for a department, HR department, for example. So it could be a risky bet to integrate AI in such a thing. So does it mean that the ice melter should be also risky, like you explained, or did I got it wrong?
It should be, you should always start with a very small risk. Like trying to light the fire, you should start with something that everybody can participate and nobody feels like, oh, this is going too fast, or this is asking me to step outside my comfort zone too far. And then once they've done that, then you can increase the risk and ask them to take the next step.
Okay, interesting. And the second thing you said that made me think is that if the team knows each other, I would go deep faster into the content. So you think then there is really no need to having such an activity before a session, before getting to work, or?
like I said, there's lots of other things that we can do to get people to the point where they can collaborate and like they feel connected and there's this trust built. But if it is a group that sees each other regularly, then hopefully you've already done that work in the last session, the last months, like last year. So you can kind of build on that. And I would still say you need to have something. Like I actually think more important than your typical icebreaker is what is happening the moment somebody walks into the room or the moment somebody logs in on Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Like those first 5 minutes, what you do there is probably more important than anything else that you do after.
Yeah, I love that. But then what would be the tips that you can give to the facilitator listening to us, like how they can make this feeling when they enter the room that something special is going to happen?
Number one, avoid saying the phrase or a version of the phrase, let's just wait until everybody's here. Because I think that's a sentence that I try to eliminate from people's vocabulary. I've said it myself before, like it's kind of just natural. You want to make sure, like the intention is you want to make sure nobody feels excluded by starting without them, right? So the intention is good. But what happens when people show up on time and you tell them, let's just wait until everybody's here? Maybe you've even noticed this in your session. Like what would people start doing in that moment?
They will start doing something else.
I would say that 2/3 of people will probably take out their phone and they start replying to an email or their laptop. They start doing other work. They're surfing on social media.
Go to the bathroom, which was what I'm saying actually. Like take the time to grab a coffee or go to the bathroom, and we should start in 5. Yeah.
So people actually leave and get a coffee, and then when you want to start, then half of the people are not there, or they're checked out, and they're actually in the middle of writing an email or reading a social media post, and then you have to actually try to get them out of the whole thing that I think most of us are trying to avoid. They're multitasking, right? Especially in virtual sessions, it's so easy to have another tab open on your screen and do something else. So if we allow people to multitask in those first few minutes, then we shouldn't be surprised that they're going to be multitasking throughout the whole session. But also, we're penalizing the people who show up on time. Like they might have rushed there to be on time, to be punctual. And if they realize that you don't start at the time that they said you're going to start, you don't kind of stand by the words that you share, then maybe the next time they're thinking, oh, I'm just gonna arrive 5 minutes later because there's nothing that I'll miss. And that might
because in a certain way you're saying to the people that are late that it's okay because you're waiting for them, and then people are penalized for being on time.
Yeah. And I think the biggest opportunity that we have there is if we don't want them to multitask, if we want them to be on time, then why not give them something they can engage with right away? Because then we set the tone of, hey, this is going to be an interactive session. Your input is going to be valued. Like this is not just me talking at you for an hour, 2 hours with a PowerPoint presentation, but it's going to be interactive. And in my opinion, anytime we meet in person or even virtual, like at the same time, there should be some kind of dialogue. It's not a one-directional, PowerPoint slide presentation, right? So if we can start in those first few minutes with an activity that invites engagement, then it'll be so much easier later in the session when you ask a question, you want people to unmute, you want people to volunteer for something. They're already primed that, okay, I've done like something low risk in the beginning in those first few minutes, and it was okay, nothing bad happened. Okay, I'm ready to take a little larger risk the next time there is an opportunity.
And so I love this actually, and I'm actually learning. So I'm trying to see how I can do this. And then would it not make it feel like we are excluding the people that are that are late because they're going to join and you're already doing something? What is your opinion on that?
Yes. So I call this activity spark activities because it's the first spark that ignites the campfire that we're building. But depending on who you ask, it's also sometimes referred to as unofficial start activity. Like it starts before the official start when everybody's here. And the goal really is to engage the very first person that shows up until the last person who's there. And they're going to come in kind of at different times. So it can't be something that has a beginning that everybody needs to be there for. It kind of needs to be designed in a way that people can join one at a time. So I'll give you some examples because I think that will make it way more clear of
Nice.
what I'm talking about. And maybe then you'll realize, oh, I've actually done this already, but maybe you've just waited a little bit longer in the session before you started it. One of my favorite things to do, especially if I work with facilitators from all around the globe for where they join as individuals, is just put up a world map and have people put a pin of where they're located. And the first person who comes in, they can put their pin. Next person who comes in, they kind of see what's happening. I explain it. Maybe there's even a text on the slide, so they right away know, okay, I have to drop my pin here. And it develops organically. The more people come in, the more pins are going to be dropped, the more things are there for me to comment on. But it's not that somebody who arrives maybe 2-3 minutes later than the first person will feel like, oh, I missed where everybody's at, because it's still visible, right? Another easy example that works in person and virtual is creating word clouds, because those actually help you be super specifically related to the topic of the session. Like if you're running a session on inclusion, you could ask, hey, what's the first word that comes to mind when you hear inclusion? Or one that I used before, what are 3 feelings that come up for you when you hear, let's start with an icebreaker? And then the more people submit, the larger the words are, the more people have submitted that word, and then you can comment on what is happening. The word clouds, also I would say the word cloud specifically, I would do not with a group with less than 10 people, because you want to get that sense of like larger words and smaller words. If there's a few people, then they might just all share different things and there's no real interest in seeing it come up. But there's lots of different things we can do and I'll say the simplest one is just asking a question, like having a question on a slide or next to you on screen, or on a flip chart, and just have people answer the question. It should be a question that's very easy to answer. Maybe even a poll. Like in person, I love to create flip charts where people put dot stickers, and it's either like scale.
I've seen one of those on LinkedIn.
One example could be I'm running a workshop on engagement, and one of the questions I would ask is, how engaged are your participants usually, from like completely disengaged to highly engaged? And they can put a sticker based on where it is. So as the more people coming in, that scale is going to fill up on one side or the other. There's a pattern that we can then comment once we start.
Nice. Really, really cool activities. Thanks for sharing. And if we are going for, like, imagine like facilitators will love to have like activity in toolkits. So you talked about like those pre-warm-up even activities. What would be the one activity that you would share in this podcast that everyone should know, and that is very versatile and that you can use no matter the type of audience? Do you have something like that, or?
There's no one perfect activity for every occasion. So like I shared in the beginning, it kind of depends. Are people strangers? Do they know each other? Are they ready to do something silly? Are they more serious? How much time do I have for the activity, right? What is the topic that I could maybe connect it to? But there are like a handful of things that have become a bit of my go-tos, because I can adjust them for almost every occasion based on my work. But this doesn't mean that it works for everybody else's work. And one of them includes, basically there's 3 rounds where I have people partner up with someone, and then I give them a question to discuss. But I make the whole finding your partner and the activity itself a bit more interesting. And I'll explain to you in a moment why. But the questions can be totally catered to the topic or the theme. So it's just a quick way for people to get to know 3 other people, and have some conversations that start them thinking about the topic. But the way you find your first partner is, and this is an activity that only works in person. I have to say that too. People are walking around a space, and I just invite them to put up one hand, find a partner, give them a high five. If they have found a partner, they can put their hand down. If they're still looking for someone, they just look for somebody else who's also with their hand up. So very quickly, people find their partner, and giving a high five to someone already creates some sort of energy, right? It's very different than, let's say, a handshake or anything else. So there's already some energy created by people moving around, giving high fives. I give them the first question. They both share. They high five their partner to thank them for the conversation, and they start walking around the room again. And for the second round, I, depending on how I do it, I have them again find a partner, same thing, high five. But this time, before they get to the question, they have to come up with a new form of greeting, also sometimes called a secret handshake. So they need to co-create something that is so unique to both of them that nobody else in the room would come up with the same thing. And the way I explain it often is kind of using improv principles. I very often use improv activities or applied improv, which is kind of the same thing, but with a purpose of how you're going to apply it for like professional, personal development, where they have to co-create it. So one person might start like, hey, let's start with a high five. Then the other person goes, cool, I like that. Yes. And what if then we spin around? Yes. Let's high five, spin around. And what if then we make a sound effect and we do go like this, and you see them co-creating something, and nobody has ever come up with the same one twice. And you see how people start getting creative. Also, at the end of the I give them about 2 minutes for this. I invite a few people to showcase their handshake to the whole group.
Nice.
And the reason why I do this is because, number one, it's super fun to see, like, after you've been doing something with your partner, see another group do something completely different, to just see the variety of like the creativity that is in the room. But also there's always a few people who are like, I really want to perform. I want that stage. So it is optional, but really important. I invite people to look at their partner before they put their hand up, because you don't want one partner to be super excited and the other one's like, I don't want to do this, because then you might get awkward. But usually there's always a few people that share, and the first ones always get a prize for having the courage to go first. So again, I'm like seeding all of the values that I want to have in the session afterwards. Like, we're co-creating. If you go first, if you're courageous, you get rewarded for that. I give them the second question, and very often I do then a third round where they again have to find a new partner, and that's where I kind of change it up. Sometimes I have people come up with a code word that is something that they have in common, so they have to have a quick conversation, then they have a code word, and at the very end of the workshop, like if I do this at the beginning, I can very quickly, or whenever I feel like the energy is low, I need people to wake up again, like after lunch, I can say, find your high five buddy, give them a high five, find your secret handshake buddy, do the secret handshake, find your code word buddy and say the code word. And people just like running around the room. Is like very quick energy because they're meeting somebody that they already know. It's like awesome. This immediate familiarity. And that's one of the reasons why I like it, because it's so versatile, because I'm bringing in like something experiential. We're not sitting and talking, we're actually moving. Like if you're doing anything around creativity, that's great. Or like brainstorming, like the idea of like we're just co-creating something. Very, very cool activity to try out.
You open just so many doors. Now I need to pick the ones that I want to take without forgetting the others. So first, like, I will come back to this, but I think I saw that you were an improv teacher. I know a lot of facilitators learned a lot from improv, actually also doing some stand-up. So I didn't practice improv, but I know it shaped a lot of comedian, and I know some of the principles. And in what you said, for example, what I like is that someone say we will do that. And because one of the principles is always accept what is proposed, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't have the discussion, no, we should start like this. And then it's like also creating this inclusive and friendly environment, because you're not challenging the idea of the other, you're just embracing it.
Yeah, like to me, that is one of the biggest principles, and closely related to that is one that is called make your partner look good. And especially with like the collaboration, the co-creation of, let's say, the secret handshake, like it's not competing. You're not like, I'm going to come up with something really cool and I want the other person to do something really bad, or let's do something that makes the other person look silly. The goal is to look good. There's lots of little things that sometimes I actually mention depending on the group and the context, where like this is from improv, and other times I don't mention improv at all, because similar to the word icebreaker or improv, or even saying things like role playing, might already get people into a certain mindset where they have this like a guard goes up, right? So I'm a huge fan of just doing the activity, giving people the instructions without naming it necessarily.
Yeah. And most of the time it's useless to know where it's coming from, right? Except if you have like, I don't know, people that are not willing to play the role, or something I was actually having this discussion on LinkedIn with Brittany is, if I may, I'm not a big fan of like breakouts activity to create connection, because I have the feeling that also that you need the group to connect between each others. What is your take on this?
I would never do a session without a breakout room or like a small group discussion, but it needs to be balanced with other things. I think the part that, especially if we think about what makes an engaging session, it's the contrast, right? Telling a story, doing a poll, getting people in small groups, having a discussion with everyone, writing something in the chat, writing something down just for yourself. Like the mix of things is what makes it really interesting. And especially when I think about how do I include everyone, I like to think of, okay, I need to make sure that I'm not just asking people to like unmute and share, or like grab the mic and share something. If I ask a question, there has to be time for people individually to reflect on the question, because some people need that processing time before they're ready to even raise their hand. Because what happens usually is you always get the same few people volunteering, you always get the same few people engaging, and there's a bunch of other people who are never really participating. And I hear from a lot of facilitators that they find that really challenging, because like, how do I get that quiet person to engage? What if they're not getting anything from this training? Are they even paying attention, right? So giving people time to think is really important. And then for a lot of people, it's easier to share something in a smaller group than a larger group. There's a are you familiar with the bystander effect?
No.
Bystander effect. They did the study where somebody faked a heart attack on a busy subway, and the more people are on the subway car, the less likely it was that somebody would step up and help that person. And if there were only a few people, or if only one person was on the subway car, they would more likely step up. I think it's the 70% would step up if it's a smaller group, and 40% if it was a larger group. And they talked
in
about
French it's called spectator effect.
Same thing. So it's this diffusion of responsibility. If there's lots of other people there, then I don't need to engage. Like if you have 30 people on a video call and you ask a question, nobody wants to respond, everybody's probably thinking, oh, somebody else will respond, I don't have to do it. But in a small group, like if there's a group of 3 and you give them the question, like they're more likely to answer the question because, well, there's only 3 of us. My turn will come at least in this time. So I'd rather share.
No, I do believe in breakouts. I mean, like during the session, but I mean, like for me, what is really important is that there is a connecting moment from the start that engage with the entire group. Even if I know that maybe it's going to be more challenging for that introvert to contribute, to share, but it's a risk I'm willing to take because I know it's gonna be beneficial for the entire group. That was more my question
like
to you.
If you're thinking of the like example activity that I shared earlier, there's usually something that I do before. Like it's not the very first thing where we connect with everyone. And I think it's interesting. I just also on LinkedIn saw Jacob Cromie. He's based also in Germany. He ran this experiment in one of their training sessions where they basically made it optional. As people were coming in, I think it was like a full day training online, they gave people the option, do you want to go and have a breakout room conversation? Or do you want to stay in the main room and we'll do some polls and you share in the chat? And then the group split up and they had one co-facilitator open up a new Zoom meeting where they did breakout rooms and they gave them prompts to meet each other. And then in the main room, they had like different questions, different programming. They did some polls and asking people to share in the chat, but nobody was like put on the spot to unmute and participate. I was really curious and I forgot to ask of like, what's the percentage of like how many people went this way versus the other? But just the fact that people have autonomy to choose what works best for them, I thought was so smart. Because if we force everybody to do one thing, then also they're less likely to engage. The more they have this element of choice, and I use this often in online sessions where I ask a question and I invite people to share in the chat. And maybe after a minute or so, then I'm going to ask, okay, is there anybody who would like to unmute, who would rather unmute and share? Or the other way around, ask people to unmute and telling people, if you want, you can also share in the chat. So they have a choice of what they feel more comfortable with, because in the end, as long as they're engaging, I don't need to hear everybody's voice. Like I'm hoping that at least some people will unmute, but not everybody has to.
I love that. I really do. Because at the end, like choosing is a form is leading to engagement, especially when you have big groups. Like, of course, you cannot have everyone to contribute the same way and to really engage. So I think it's a really nice one. Jan, you're also known for like creating like real conversation, meaningful conversation, deep connection. And you shared an example in the beginning of the session. It was like, share one of your success. And I have no opinion on this, but my thought is that if you ask too much of a big question or a deep question, maybe it's going to feel weird to talk about this with a stranger. And also like the example of the success, maybe like my success story is going to be so good that I'm going to scare the other one to share. What's your opinion on that?
Like I'm going to, in a way, repeat what I shared earlier, you really have to pick the right question or the right activity for the group. Like in this case, the place where I used that specific question was a personal goal setting retreat. Like everybody's here, like we're working on our goals. It's in January. Like that's the topic. So asking people to share a win is very closely related to that. But you're right that it also gets into this bit of a competitiveness, right? When we're sharing wins or successes, where or even like one other activity that I don't like at all, share your name and a fun fact, or like two truths and a lie. Very often those get very competitive because people just want to be the most interesting person. They don't want to be boring. So it kind of depends on how you introduce it. And there is ways where I think that activity works with like the right group, with the right environment. And maybe it's not the very first thing that you do, but very often it just people get thrown into it without the context. And then that kind of becomes the challenge, that people just go like, oh, I did this and I did that. Or I don't have anything that is as good as the other people. So they feel self-conscious about that.
So I think you said multiple times in this episode so far is that it's really important to pick the activity that fits the group. How can you do that when you never worked with the group before and you didn't have any preparation or any chance to meet any of them before?
So working with an organization or working with individuals, like which I can talk about both. Which one would you prefer?
Let's take the organization example, since it's more what I do.
Yeah. So with organizations, often you have one person that hires you and then a bunch of people show up that you've never met before, right? So, and worst case scenario, they're even sent there. It's mandatory for them to attend. They didn't choose your topic, right? That I would say is like maybe the most challenging situation, where the melting of the ice, I think, needs to be front and center before you do anything else. And like I said in the beginning, I think that starts way before people enter the room. So what can I do before people even show up that help me make a connection with them? And there's a few things that I do. Number one is I always ask the person who hires me, how well do people know each other? Like on the scale from like silly to serious, where would you put them? Like I try to get as much information from that person. Also, like, are there any individuals that I should be looking out for? Because maybe they love to talk, or maybe they're really quiet, or maybe there's something else that gives me some insights to prepare for that. But I usually don't rely on that, because I do two other things. Number one is I send a personal video message to the person who hires me to share with everybody who's attending, where I can introduce myself, because I have learned this from, like, I worked in video production for over 10 years and I've created a lot of video content also online. People always tell me when they meet me for the first time, but they've seen my videos, oh, it's like I already know you. So in a way, I'm giving myself this advantage of at least halfway starting a relationship with the people who are there by letting them see me. Like, I try not to make it super rehearsed. If I miss a word or say something wrong, I just leave it in. The goal is not to make it perfect, but to make it real and relatable. But I also set expectations of like, hey, here's what we're going to do, and here's what I expect from you. And like, this is going to be interactive. There will be breakout rooms, like whatever I can tell people ahead of time. And then I usually end with asking them 3 questions that they can respond. Either this is through a survey tool, or if I'm sending the video, I love to use Video Ask. I don't know if you know about Video Ask, but basically it's a video polling or survey tool. So I can have my video message, and at the end, I can ask my question where people can just click a button and enter text. They could record a video message or an audio message. So again, they have a choice over how they're going to send me their information. And I like to ask three questions. They sometimes are different, but I always like to ask, hey, what's one challenge that you would like to solve around the topic of why we're coming together? If this time was spent, if the time that we spent together was really valuable for you, and at the end you're like, wow, this was so worth my time, what would need to happen by the end? And the third thing, I always ask, is there anything that you need to fully participate, or that would help you to participate more in terms of accessibility, for example? Because I don't want to be surprised by somebody that is in a wheelchair, for example, and I'm planning all of this movement activities. Like, yes, I can adapt like in the moment, but the more I know beforehand, then I can adjust for that. Like, I had one person join a virtual facilitator training with me that was blind, and had I not known that beforehand, I would have like just got so worried because they never turned on the camera, right? But later I had a one-on-one call with him, and he kind of showed me how the screen reader works, and I made sure that whenever there's visuals on the slides, I had somebody or myself describe what we see. And all of these things help me design it specifically for that person, for that group.
Wow, I love that. And my question to you is like, do people participate to the survey with the video? Because, sometimes I also like to send survey, and I see some people like they are making the perfect answer. They are taking the time. And then you have some that like give you answers so that it's done. I'm curious, like, what is the ratio like after doing it for a couple of time?
I want to say I get at least 2/3 of people to fill it out. And if they fill it out, they usually like leave enough information where I feel like, okay, this is useful for me. And maybe I've been really lucky, but in the end, it's it helps them, right? It's
yeah, definitely. Because
if they tell me, then I can implement those things. If they have a challenge, then I can address it in the training. If they tell me what they want to get out of it, I can make sure that we include that. And if they don't, then it's out of my control. So I always phrase it in that way, but I don't expect everybody to participate. And even like with the options of using video, audio, and text, most use text, but there might be 1 or 2 people who use the other. And the great thing is, if depending on who I send it out, sometimes I make it anonymous. If it's not anonymous, I can actually respond to them. I can respond with another video message and thank them for sending something. At one point, I'll even ask people to record an audio so I know how to pronounce their name. And
wow.
That was really interesting, because in that case, it was a company in the UK, and everybody was like John, Tim, like not compared to some of the work I do in Canada, where everybody is from a different background and people's names are kind of difficult to pronounce. It was all like, John, Tim, Bob, like very, very easy to pronounce names, but they still did it, which I thought was quite fun.
Like, I think like no people are realizing the effort and the work it takes to right from the start creating like deep connections. I'm looking at the watch, of course, because otherwise this episode is going to be 2 hours. Let me go this way. I think I've seen you a couple of times on LinkedIn talking about how bad the 2 truth, 1 lie activity is. And I love your stake on it. And I'm a good one to challenge you, because I'm the one using this activity, not with the group I don't know, but with groups I know. What is explain to the people why you believe it's not a good activity?
All right. So for the people who might not have heard two truths and 1 lie before, I did some research on the first page on Google. If you type in what's the best icebreaker out there, most of them are lists, like the results that you get on Google. And 9 out of 10 lists have 2 truths and 1 lie, pretty far on the top, if it not is the first one that they recommend. And the goal or the game goes like this, where everybody shares 3 facts. 2 of them are true and 1 of them is a lie, and people have to spot the lie. And there's one kind of fundamental thing that I think is challenging with the activity. And then there's a lot of other things that are more like how it's facilitated, how it's introduced. But the fundamental thing is, if the goal is to lie to your colleagues, and then the person who's the best liar gets rewarded, but the original purpose of the activity is to build trust, I'm like, lying and trusting people is the complete opposite direction. Right? So can we do something differently, either change the activity or a different activity that actually has the goal as, hey, we will trust each other more after this, and not go like, oh my God, I thought you told the truth. You're such a good liar. I feel like that's not a compliment if you're trying to build trust, because then you start second guessing.
That's why you lied to
anything
me
they
about
say.
the deadline.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a version of this where I call it 2 wins and 1 wish. So 2 wins, or like 2 things you've accomplished, two things you've actually done in your life, and maybe in the last year, if you want to make it more specific, and 1 thing that you hope to do in the next year. And this could be personal, could be business related. But in a way, all 3 things are true. Even the thing that you haven't accomplished yet, although you're lying, once people find out what it is, the energy that usually comes together is people go like, oh, how can I support you get there? Oh, you want to run a marathon? I've run a marathon. Here's some tips, or here's a podcast you should listen to. Like, very different dynamic than having been told a lie and then like, oh, you actually didn't do that. I got so excited that you did, but now we can't talk about it because it was a lie.
Oh, I love your take. So even if I'm running this activity, the fact that you're saying like the goal is to build trust and then you're rewarding people to lie, it's crazy. And you're right. But the way I see it is like, it's such a cool activity to make it fun, like, because then people are challenging themselves to make something like big they made, like almost feel like a lie, but actually they did it. And that's what I love about the activity. But when I saw your take, it made me question if I should keep doing it.
Like, here's the time where I think this is a great activity to use. If you have a group that already has built the trust, or a group that knows each other already really well, where they can also have some insights on what could be a lie or what could be true. I would never do this with strangers, but if it's a group that already has built enough of those connections, I actually think that it could be a lot of fun. With the additional instruction of either tell people ahead of time that, hey, next Friday we'll be playing 2 truths and a lie, so come prepared with your 3 facts. Or, hey, before we start with the first person, everybody take 5 minutes to write down your 3 facts. Because the other big thing that happens in that activity is the people who are not good at lying will not be able to figure out what their lie is. And while the other person is sharing their 3 facts, they're still thinking about theirs. So suddenly they're not listening. And again, we're teaching, ideally, we would be teaching in an activity people, hey, we should listen to each other. We should be present with each other. But if just by design, it makes people not be able to do that, then we need to design it in a different way, like giving people that extra time.
Yeah, I do agree. And I think for any activity I ask, actually, especially, I give them time to prepare. Because even me on the spot, and I know my answers can be like, it can be tricky, especially if you never done the activity before. Jan, you told me something interesting, like, before we record, is that you've been in a workshop yesterday. It was a training and you felt something. Like, can you tell us a bit more about what happened?
Yeah, so part of a training that I'm leading right now called the EPIC Facilitator, where EPIC stands for engagement, inclusion. Hold on, I need to get the letters in the right order. Engagement, purpose, inclusion, and collaboration. Those are like the 4 things. If I feel like those are present in a session, then you're going to be successful. But one of the parts that I was quite excited about is we did a session called the High Stakes Facilitation Lab, where we picked some of the most challenging situations that could happen in terms of like team dynamics or participants not engaging or becoming like disruptive, and we role played through them. And I set up the scenario. I played a difficult character. Other people on the call got some instructions in the chat privately. And then one person had to basically figure out how they would address this challenging situation. And the 2 that we actually played through yesterday was, one, somebody made an inappropriate joke. And like, do you completely ignore it? Which in this case, we wanted to see what happens if you address it and how you can address it without making that person who said it, who might have not thought so much about the impact it would have, still make them feel respected and listened to and not put down. And that turned out to be a really challenging moment where I think the person who volunteered at one point was like, I give up. I don't know what else to do. And I played the challenging participant, and I also wanted to play it like not make the first thing that they try work, right? So we really try to play in this, how can we make this really realistic, but also maybe a bit more extreme than it might be in real life? Because once you rehearse this once, or even the people who are watching this and like were in that moment had to think about what they would do, then when it happens in real, you've already rehearsed it once. You already have some ideas of what might work or what might not work. And that was that was maybe one of the most impactful sessions I've led in a long time.
And that's and you're right, because like every people listening, I was like, how would I react to such situation? And I do believe at the end of the secret for those situations is to have been in so many different type of tricky situations that you build this muscle on how to react, like under, let's say, under stress, under emergency, because this can really impact the session and also the engagement of the participants. So such a nice thing that you're doing it with people. All right, Jan, I think I could ask you thousands of questions. But maybe one last, and then I will give the word to you if you want to share a last thing with the audience. You talked about C-suite, and I remember, like, I think it was 2 years ago, I had my first workshop with like executives, and I had this question in my mind a lot of time, like, should I have a connecting moment? Should I run an icebreaker with them? And at the end I did, and it worked great. So also learn that practice what you preach, even for those people. At the end of the day, they are people. What would be your advice that you would give to people facilitating such groups And what is the best practice when it comes to that?
So one thing I've already shared, which is don't say let's start with an icebreaker.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't name the activity. Like, even though there's like, I love to use ice melter or warm up game or connection activity or connection before content, whatever it is, just don't name it anything, and just invite people into the instructions. And at the same time, I would probably go slower. Like, if we're thinking again of the metaphor of building the campfire, asking people to take a risk, just having a conversation with someone that also is related. Like, with that group, I probably would think they are very skeptical. They have very limited time. They want to make sure that work gets done. So it has to be related to the content. It almost has to be disguised. I often talk about building Trojan horses, where inside is the connection activity that builds trust, that I know people really need, but I'm kind of building it around like, hey, let's talk about the topic that we're here to discuss. And I give them a question and I ask them to find a partner and exchange their answer to it. And it might not feel like a typical icebreaker, but it's still giving me the impact that I'm looking for.
Amazing. I think you're nailing the metaphors, like in this entire episode. It's so I can see all the visuals. That's great. I think people will remember all of those amazing insights. Jan, last question. Is there a topic that you want to share as an expert in those things, like an advice, a resource, anything?
Oh, that's a great question. I think maybe related to the lab session that I just mentioned. A lot of facilitators out there, a lot of trainers out there, like, there's so much training on like frameworks and activities. And even like, I shared some activities today, but I think the real masterful practitioners, they're able to design a session, like I said, for the right group, for the right moment. And they're able to completely throw out everything and improvise and see what the group needs. And I think that's maybe the biggest skill of how can you adapt in the moment without the group realizing that you're doing that. So many times I have maybe 20 slides, like whole piece of content that I never get to, but nobody will ever find out unless they look at my slide deck at the end of the session. Because in the moment, I'm like listening to people, I'm reading the room, I'm checking in, I'm realizing, hey, this conversation, like, we need more time with that. Even in the role play session yesterday, the first scenario, we just needed to debrief. Like, it was intense. We needed to make sure we debrief it. We took a break. We came back. We checked in with everyone again before we moved on to the next thing. And if I had gone with my plan of like, hey, I want to do this many role plays and these are the scenarios, I would have had to say, okay, we're going to have to take a cut here and just move on to the next thing. So the more we can feel confident in our ability to be able to adjust, and then really listen and kind of pay attention to what the group needs in that moment, then that's going to be the difference between somebody who's doing it in a masterful way and somebody who's still a beginner.
Wow. This is an amazing, I think, advice for ending the episode. And it's so true. I always say, like, I think the frameworks, the principles, the rules, they are really important in the beginning of your journey because they give you a direction. They allows you to make a good work if you're not good with the other thing that really matters. But then further you go, you should move away from those and fully engage with the content. And because you've done it so many times, like with like some guardrails, or I think this is how we say it in English, it will be okay because now you know how to fully deepen into the content and engage in what's happening in the room. Jan, it's been amazing. Thanks a lot for sharing all your tips. I'm so excited to finally see your book in my hands. I'm sure you're more excited than me. So of course I will put every information in the show notes. I think you have a specific newsletter on ice melters.
Yeah, I'm actually sharing a little piece of the book, like a little story or framework or update every Monday. You can sign up on icemeltersbook.com. And once the book is available, all the information will be on there or definitely sent in the email list as well. And the fun thing is people hold me accountable to actually get it out because, yes, there's a lot of people who are excited to see it out. And sometimes I procrastinate a little bit. So anytime somebody replies to an email like, hey, this is a really cool thing, or like, hey, here's some feedback, I'm like, okay, cool. People are listening. They're paying attention. I need to keep working on it.
No, this is great. Then you have healthy pressure. That's actually my favorite. As a procrastinator myself, this is what I always do. I put myself out there so that I don't have the choice. to just
Exactly.
execute. So I'm not going to ask you when the book is coming. Subscribe to the newsletter. You will have amazing value. Is there any other actuality that you want to share?
Actuality or like...
Yeah, so maybe it's too much French. Like I know you have your new epic facilitator training. Maybe
Yeah.
you want to share about it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in learning more about my work, I think once you go to icemeltersbook.com, that also you also end up on my website where it has whatever is relevant and current. Because I don't know when you're going to be listening to this episode, so that might be the best place to go. But please also find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me. Actually, send me a personal note when you connect with me, and I'll be happy to take it from there.
Amazing. Thank you a lot, Jan. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. We see each other very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.